They don't feel the loss. When you walk away, they feel it in the silence that follows. Not instantly, not dramatically, not in the way you felt it, when you still cared, but in the small places, the quiet hours, the moments where your presence used to fill the air without them ever realizing how much softer life felt because you were in it. Loss doesn't hit them like a storm, it hits them like a slow unraveling, a tightening, a shift, a weight they can't name. Because when your heart is big, your absence is bigger. And when someone takes you for granted, the first thing they feel isn't regret. It's the sudden and unfamiliar emptiness where your energy used to live. They don't call it missing you. Not yet. They call it something feels off. Why does today feel heavier? Why am I irritated over nothing? They feel the first bruise before they understand. It came from losing you because you were never just a person to them. You were balance. You were warmth. You were the quiet reassurance that didn't need to be spoken. You held the atmosphere together. And the moment you're gone, the air changes. Everything feels slightly colder, slightly harsher, slightly more real than they know how to handle. They don't admit this. Not to you, not to themselves, not at first, because admitting your absence matters means admitting your presence always did. And that is something their pride doesn't know how to swallow. But still, they feel it. They feel it. The moment the routine breaks, the moment the conversations stop, the moment they look at their phone and it doesn't light up with your softness, your support, your attention, your presence, they feel the shift in the place you used to pour into because you were the bridge between their chaos and their calm. And now that it's gone, the chaos has no place to go. It turns inward. It turns into restlessness, short tempers, sleepless nights, scrolling with no destination, silence that feels louder than their thoughts can handle. Something is missing, but they can't name it yet, because naming it means they have to face what they never appreciated. When they had it, they start to notice how heavy life is without someone soft to land on. They notice how much effort it takes to be okay without someone steady to check in on them. They notice how draining it is to be alone when they once had someone who made it feel easier. You don't leave quietly. Your absence echoes, and it's only the beginning. Because the moment you're no longer there, they begin to feel what they never felt when you were still trying. They feel the space where your reassurance used to live, the space where your understanding used to soften them, the space where your patience used to stretch far beyond what they ever deserved. That space swallows them, slowly, quietly, uncomfortably, because life without you requires emotional muscles they never developed. They feel the shift in their confidence first. It doesn't come crashing down. It just flickers. They second guess themselves more. They question their worth quietly. Things that used to roll off easily now get stuck under their skin, in their mind, in the places you used to calm without trying. They don't realize it yet, but this is the beginning of missing you, the kind of missing that has nothing to do with longing and everything to do with recognizing you were the stability they mistook for normal. And now, normal is gone. Your presence was softness in a world that rarely made sense to them. And your absence is a mirror they don't know how to look into. Because without you, they must confront themselves, the parts you held, the wounds you softened, the insecurities you absorbed. Without being asked, you were the buffer between their emotional immaturity and their daily life. Now there is no buffer. Nothing protects them from their own patterns. Nothing shields them from the discomfort they used to hand to you to carry. And the moment that discomfort returns, they feel it deeply, unexpectedly, violently, in the quietest way. They feel the weight of their own avoidance, their own detachment, their own inability to handle closeness without ruining it. They feel the guilt. They don't want to call guilt, so they call it stress or busyness or I'm just tired. But it's not tired. It's consequence. It's the emotional bill they didn't expect to pay. You were cushioning their life in ways they didn't notice. Now they notice everything. They feel exposed by the emptiness, by the lack of emotional oxygen, by the absence of the one person who never made them feel like they had to earn being understood. They don't panic at first. They won't chase you immediately. They won't admit the shift because the first thing they feel isn't missing you, it's losing themselves. You were grounding. You were clarity, direction, calmness masquerading as conversation, security disguised as simple presence. You were the emotional invisibles they believed they deserved until they didn't have them. And suddenly, everything feels harder. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, but heavier in ways they can't explain. Their mornings feel different. Their nights feel longer. Their mind feels louder. Their heart feels unsteady because you held the emotional weight they never thank you for. And the moment you leave, that weight drops right back into their hands. They don't know how to carry it. They don't know how to hold themselves. They don't know how to function without someone smoothing the edges of their internal storms. So the storms come back. Restlessness, shortness, sadness with no name, frustration with no cause, nostalgia they don't want to admit, a strange ache that follows them everywhere. This is the first crack, the first shift, the first awakening, the moment your absence becomes louder than your presence ever had to be. Because when someone takes your heart for granted, they never realize how much of their life was built on your love until the foundation disappears. And now they're standing in the wreckage of what they assumed would always be there. But they won't call it missing you. Not yet. They'll feel it as confusion, disconnection, discomfort, a sudden inability to feel settled the way they once did, because you were the calming hum in their world. And without you, everything is noise. This is only the beginning, because soon they will feel the real loss, the emotional one, the personal one, the version of themselves one. But first, they feel the shift, the imbalance, the quiet ache, the space you used to fill effortlessly. And the truth is, your presence healed them in ways they never realized. Your absence reveals it in ways they can't ignore. And then the second wave hits, not the kind that crashes, the kind that creeps. Slow, quiet, inevitable. It shows up in the places you used to make lighter, the tiny moments they never thought would ever feel heavy, like waking up and not having your name on the screen, like reaching for their phone out of habit and remembering you no longer live in their notifications, like hearing something funny and realizing they no longer have someone to send it to who actually laughs with their whole heart. They don't call it loneliness. Not yet. They call it boredom or distraction or I've just been in my head. But it's not boredom. It's not distraction. It's the subtle ache of being forgotten by the one person who used to make their days feel less empty. You were their emotional weather. Now everything feels a little colder, a little duller, a little too quiet. They feel the loss in the way their day doesn't have a center anymore because you were the emotional gravity they pretended not to need, the anchor they thought they could replace, the presence they believed would always orbit them, no matter how far they drifted. But now, they feel the drift. They feel the distance. They feel the space. And the space is not peaceful. It's unsettling because they realize how many parts of their life you filled without ever asking for anything back. They start to feel the uncertainty, that shaky, subtle panic. That doesn't look like heartbreak, but feels like it in slow motion. They try to distract themselves. They scroll. They text people they don't care about. They dive into noise to silence the discomfort. But discomfort follows them. Because the truth is, when you leave someone's life, after pouring yourself into them, it's never just your absence they feel. It's their own emptiness, echoing back at them. You were the place they never admitted they depended on. You were the emotional clarity they didn't know they were pulling from. Now their mind is a little more chaotic, their thoughts a little less steady, their confidence a little more fragile. They weren't prepared to carry their own emotions again because you carried so much for so long. And now the silence that replaces your care is loud enough to feel like consequence. They start remembering things, not the big moments, the small ones. How you listened, even when your day was heavy. How you understood what they didn't say. How you forgave what they didn't apologize for. How you made them feel chosen in a world that often made them feel replaceable. They remember the calm of being known, the safety of being accepted, the warmth of being understood. Without performance, they don't call this missing you. Not yet, but it is. It's the beginning. They feel it most at night, the hours when the world stops and the mind starts, when the distractions fade and the real feelings surface, when all the things they didn't appreciate start replaying in the back of their mind. Without permission, that's when the ache grows. Because nights expose truth, nights expose emptiness, nights expose memories they tried to outrun. They think about the last time you were soft with them, the last time you tried, the last time you reached out, and they responded with indifference because they assumed you always would. And for the first time, they wish they had listened more, given more, matched more, held more. But regret doesn't hit all at once. It hits in pulses, in quiet waves that carry your name. Even when they pretend they're fine, they start wondering what you're doing, who you're becoming, whether you still feel what they're just now starting to feel. And that thought, that tiny, sudden thought stings. Not because they miss you deeply yet, but because they realize you might not be missing them at all. You were always the one who loved deeper, who gave first, who stayed longer. And now, you're gone. Gone in a way that feels final. Gone in a way that feels intentional. Gone in a way that feels like you finally chose yourself. And that is the exact moment they begin to sink into the second layer of missing you, the realization that you are not coming back just because they feel something. Life doesn't bend for them anymore. Your heart doesn't orbit theirs anymore. Your love doesn't cushion them anymore. And they feel it in very specific ways. They feel it in their mornings, in their routines, in the moments where your presence used to soften their edges. Your absence makes everything sharper. The world feels heavier. Conversations feel emptier. Connections feel different. Because you weren't just a person. You were emotional meaning. You were the difference between feeling alone and feeling understood, between feeling lost and feeling grounded, between chaos and calm. And now, that difference is gone. They don't feel like themselves. And for the first time, they wonder if maybe you were the part of them that kept them steady. They don't want to admit this. Their pride won't let them. So they call it mood swings, or stress, or the weather, or just life being life. But it isn't. It's you. It's what you carried, what you stabilized, what you healed, what you softened. They feel the absence of all the things they never said thank you for. They feel it when they're around people who don't know them the way you did. They feel it when conversations fall flat, when support feels shallow, when attention feels forced, when no one asks them the right questions the way you did effortlessly. You weren't just presence, you were alignment. They feel the misalignment now. Life feels different when someone who understood your soul is no longer part of it. And the moment your energy leaves, the world stops making sense in the way it once did. They start replaying your last interactions, the last messages, the last softness, the last silence, looking for the moment they lost you, looking for the moment they didn't listen, didn't care, didn't show up, didn't choose you back. This is when guilt slips in, quiet, sharp, uninvited, because now they see how much of you was unconditional, how much of you was love they never earned, but always accepted, as though it were guaranteed. They feel the mistake, but not the lesson. Not yet. That comes later. For now, they feel the ache of someone who realizes they lost something they didn't understand until it was too late. They feel the distance, not as rejection, but as revelation. A revelation that your absence tells the truth they refused to see. They were comfortable because you were reliable. They were steady because you were stabilizing. They felt chosen because you kept choosing them, even when they gave you nothing to hold on to. Now the roles have reversed. Now they are the one, waiting, wondering, watching, feeling. Your absence is the first reality they can't avoid. It's the first consequence they can't brush off. It's the first shift they can't run from. Because when someone like you leaves, you take the version of them you were holding together, and you take their favorite version of themselves with you. Now they are left with their own reflection, and it's not pretty, not comforting, not stable, because you made them better. You made them softer. You made them kinder. You made them feel like they mattered. Now they feel the absence of all those things, not because they're missing you, but because they're missing the person they were when you were there. They miss the safety of being understood, the ease of being cared for, the warmth of being chosen by someone who meant it. They miss the best version of themselves, the one only you brought out. But the shift gets deeper because soon they won't just feel the loss, they'll confront why they lost you. This is the part they never see coming. The part where missing you turns into confronting themselves. Because missing you is emotional, but losing you, that's personal. It forces them into a kind of honesty they've avoided for years. It strips away the excuses, the pride, the walls, the illusions. This is where the real impact hits, not in the silence, not in the distance, not in the empty space, but in the mirror, because your absence does something they never expected. It shows them who they actually are. Without the softness, you wrap them in, and it's uncomfortable. It's exposing. It's humbling. It's the kind of truth that doesn't whisper. It stares. They start noticing their own patterns, their own coldness, their own avoidance, their own inability to pour back even a fraction of what you gave. And for the first time, they realize just how much of you they took for granted. They realize how easy you made love feel, how simple you made understanding look, how natural you made connection seem. And now, without you, nothing feels natural. Everything feels forced. Everything feels unstable. Everything feels like effort they never had to put in. When you were there, this is where self-awareness creeps in. Quiet at first, a whisper of guilt, a flicker of realization, a sudden moment where memory becomes clarity. They remember times you tried to open up, and they shut down. Times you came closer, and they pulled away. Times you needed reassurance, and they acted cold because they didn't know how to show up. They start piecing together all the ways they made you feel alone, even while you were loving them. And now, they're the one sitting with the loneliness. And loneliness feels different when you know you helped create it. They start replaying moments they thought were small, moments you felt deeply, moments they brushed off, moments they ignored, moments they didn't think mattered, like how you always noticed when they were quiet, but they never noticed when you were breaking, like how you always tried to make things easier, but they always made you work harder, like how you showed up, even on empty, but they disappeared when things got real. They feel it now, the imbalance, the one-sidedness, the subtle selfishness they labeled as just who I am. They realize you weren't asking for much. You were asking for effort, for intention, for care, for presence, for the smallest form of reciprocity. But even that felt like too much for them because they didn't know how much they were benefiting from the version of you that kept giving even when it hurt. And now that you're gone, they feel the gap, the space where effort should have lived, the space where warmth should have been mutual, the space where love should have been balanced. They begin to see how uneven things were, how draining it must have been to keep pouring into someone who didn't know how to hold anything without dropping it. They realize you weren't asking for perfection, you were asking for partnership, and they didn't give it. Not because you weren't worthy, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't want to grow in the ways that loving you required. Your love demanded maturity. Your presence demanded honesty. Your consistency demanded effort. They weren't ready for that. So instead of rising, they shrank. They hid. They numbed. They withdrew. But your absence removes the hiding place. There is no one buffering their emotional storms, no one regulating their chaos, no one holding space for their contradictions, no one translating their silence into understanding. They feel the emotional weight you used to carry for them, and it's heavy, too heavy, heavier than they expected, because you weren't giving too much. They were giving too little, and now they see it clearly. This is where the third layer of the impact hits, the realization that you didn't walk away to punish them. You walked away to save yourself, and that truth cuts deeper than silence ever could, because if you left to save yourself, it means things were worse for you than they ever admitted. It means the pain you carried was real. The loneliness you felt was real. The exhaustion you hid was real. It means you were drowning while they were floating on the surface, thinking everything was fine. This forces them into the hardest truth. You didn't stop pouring because you lost interest. You stopped pouring because you had nothing left to give someone who wasn't giving back. And now they have to sit with the consequences of their own emotional neglect. This is when guilt turns into accountability, not the kind they speak out loud, the quiet kind, the internal kind, the kind that sits heavy in the chest. At 2 a.m., They start seeing your worth. With the clarity only distance can provide, they realize you weren't too sensitive. You were emotionally awake. You weren't too intense. You were honest. You weren't too much. You were consistent. They realize they were the one, unprepared for real love, not you. And that revelation shakes something in them because they thought they lost someone who cared. But now they see they lost someone who healed, who understood, who supported, who gave, who tried, who believed. Someone rare, someone irreplaceable, someone they'll never meet again. In the same way, and it doesn't matter who they date next, who they talk to, who they distract themselves with. No one is going to love them the way you did, not because you were perfect, but because you were intentional. You brought meaning to things they treated casually. You brought depth to moments they skimmed over. You brought feeling to places they kept numb. You awakened parts of them they weren't ready to feel. Now those parts are awake and restless. And without you, they don't know what to do with them. This is where the longing deepens, not for you, but for the version of themselves you brought out, the version that felt seen, understood, safe, held, loved, without games, without conditions, without fear. They missed the emotional piece that came from being loved by someone who meant it. And that's when the fourth layer hits. They start realizing they didn't just lose you, they lost the person they were becoming because of you. And that loss is bigger than they expected, deeper than they admit, more permanent than they're prepared for. Because you were growth, you were grounding, you were transformation, you were healing disguised as love. And now, the healing stops, the growth stalls, the softness hardens, the progress reverses. Without you, they fall back into old versions of themselves they thought they'd outgrown, versions you pulled them out of, versions you saved them from, versions they swore they'd never return to. But you were the difference between who they were and who they were becoming. Your love was the bridge. Your presence was the guide. Your care was the catalyst. And now the bridge is gone. The guide is gone. The catalyst is gone. And they feel lost, not because they need you to survive, but because they needed you to grow. You were the emotional mirror that showed them who they could be. Now they're staring at who they are. And the truth isn't pretty. This is when the longing turns inward. This is when missing you turns into wishing they'd shown up. This is when regret becomes real. This is when your absence becomes the lesson they can't avoid. Let's continue this. The awakening, the consequences, and the moment they finally realize they were never losing you. They were losing themselves. This is the moment everything turns. The moment missing you stops being emotional and becomes transformational. Because before this, they were feeling the loss. Now, they start understanding it. And understanding always hurts more than feeling. This is where clarity crashes in, like a truth they can't outrun. They finally see what your presence protected them from, what your love shielded them against, what your care kept them from confronting. You made their world easier, more gentle, more survivable. And without you, they are face to face with the parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. This is when the fourth wave hits, the realization that you weren't just good for them. You were growth. You were calm. You were direction. You were grounding. You were healing. And now, without you, everything feels unsettled. Everything feels off. Everything feels heavier than it should. Because losing you didn't just remove love, it removed structure. It removed stability. It removed accountability. It removed emotional clarity. You weren't just someone they cared about. You were the mirror that reflected the parts of them they didn't know how to face. And now, the mirror is gone. So they're left with their own unfiltered reflection, their own patterns, their own habits, their own wounds, their own emotional immaturity. And the truth hits. You didn't break them. They broke themselves by refusing to grow. While they had someone worth growing for, they finally see how they pushed you away without ever meaning to, how they dismissed your feelings because they didn't understand their own, how they thought you were overreacting when all you ever wanted was connection, how they made you feel needy for asking for basic emotional presence, how they made you feel like a burden for wanting consistency, how they convinced you your love was too much, when in reality their capacity was too little. This honesty hits different now. It hits deeper because now they see how much damage their lack of effort caused, not just to you, but to themselves, because losing you reveals what they lost inside themselves. They start remembering the moments you asked for more and they shut down, the moments you reached out and they pulled away, the moments you tried to fix things while they pretended everything was fine, the moments you gave the kind of love people pray for and they responded with silence. And that silence comes back for them now. It follows them. It mirrors them. It echoes in every space you used to fill. Because your absence is not empty. Your absence is loud. Loud enough to expose everything they didn't see when your love was easy. This is where the real regret begins. Not the surface kind, the deep kind, the kind that shows up in simple moments, like seeing something you would have loved and realizing they can't send it to you anymore, like hearing a song you once played for them and feeling it differently now, like catching themselves thinking, I should tell them this, before remembering you're no longer theirs, like noticing how every new person feels shallow compared to the connection you gave effortlessly, like understanding, finally, that your love wasn't replaceable because you weren't. You were different. You were real. You were rare. You were intentional. You were rooted. You were the kind of love that doesn't come twice. And that's when the fifth wave hits, the realization that losing you is permanent, not because you're bitter, not because you're punishing them, not because you're holding a grudge, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that tolerated being underloved. You've outgrown the version of yourself that begged for the bare minimum. You've outgrown the version of yourself that thought you had to prove you were worthy of love. You finally see your own value, your own worth, your own depth, your own capacity, and you've learned something they never expected. You can love someone and still choose yourself. You can care deeply and still walk away. You can be soft and still say, this is not enough for me. Your departure was healing. Your silence was recovery. Your separation was rebirth. And now, they're watching you bloom. From the outside, they see you becoming lighter, clearer, more confident, more grounded, more aligned. They see the glow that comes from peace, the glow you couldn't have when you were busy fixing someone who never fixed anything in return. They see you growing into someone they don't have access to anymore. And that's the part that hits hardest. You're healing in ways they didn't expect because they thought you needed them. They thought losing them would break you. They thought you would come back the moment they pulled away. But you didn't chase. You didn't beg. You didn't collapse. You evolved. And that evolution is the consequence of their inaction, the karmic echo of their emotional avoidance, the proof that your love was never the problem. It was their inability to receive it. And the more you heal, the more they unravel, the more you move forward, the more they get stuck, the more you find peace, the more they feel the weight of what they lost, because now they see the truth. They weren't protecting themselves from being hurt by you. They were protecting themselves from being changed by you. And now they are unchanged and unhealed and unfinished. They see their patterns. They see their fears. They see their avoidance. They see it all because losing you removed the cushion that kept them comfortable. They lost the person who made emotional intimacy feel possible. They lost the person who cared enough to try. They lost the person who believed in them when they didn't deserve it. And now they're left with the truth. They didn't lose someone replaceable. They lost the one person who understood their soul without being asked. They lost the one heart that tried when everyone else would have walked away sooner. They lost the one love that came with intention, patience, and emotional depth. They lost you, and losing you is the moment their entire growth arc begins. Because your absence forces evolution in a way your presence never could. You were the lesson. You were the turning point. You were the wake-up call that life delivers only once. And here's the part you need to know. Their regret is not your responsibility. Their awakening is not your burden. Their healing is not your job. You did your part. You showed up. You loved deeply. You gave honestly. You poured beautifully. Now it's your time to receive. Your time to align. Your time to choose yourself with the same loyalty you once gave to them. Your story doesn't end with loss. It continues with rebirth, with expansion, with self-worth, with a heart that finally realizes its own power. Let them feel the absence. Let them face the truth. Let them meet the version of themselves your love tried to save. Your only job now is to keep becoming. And if this message found the part of you that needed to hear it, you already know your healing is happening. You already know your power is returning. You already know your story is just beginning. If you're still here and this spoke to your soul, don't leave without letting me know. Your growth deserves to be seen. Your evolution deserves to be witnessed. Drop a comments so I know you made it to the end and you're choosing yourself now. You're becoming unstoppable and they feel it.